We return now to today's vote in the House on a resolution denouncing bigotry in many forms. Nick Schifrin looks now at the path to this divisive debate on Capitol Hill.
For years, Minnesota Democrat Ilhan Omar has criticized Israeli policies. As a candidate, she argued that criticism was not the same as criticism of Jews.
I see there being a difference between criticism of a country, criticism of its administration and its government, and criticism of the people and their faith.
But in February, Republicans targeted her Israel comments, and she said she was being attacked because, quote, it's all about the Benjamins, baby, suggesting $100 bills created support for Israel. When asked who she thought was paying U.S. politicians to be pro-Israel, she replied the powerful lobbying group AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Her critics accused her of repeating anti-Semitic tropes linking Jewish influence to money. By the next day, she deleted the tweets, but Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has called her criticism inappropriate.
The language they are using is wrong, and I would say their leadership is wrong for not standing up to it. It's unacceptable in this country, especially when you sat back and you thought about and you listened to what this country went through in World War II.
The same day, her own party issued a statement saying her, quote, use of anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations about Israel's supporters is deeply offensive. Omar, who is Muslim and black, issued a statement thanking her colleagues for, quote, educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes. She said, I unequivocally apologized, but also criticized the, quote, problematic role of lobbyists in our politics. It's not the first time she's apologized. During the 2012 conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, she tweeted, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. In January, she labeled that tweet unfortunate and offensive. But President Trump said those apologies weren't enough.
What she said is so deep-seated in her heart that her lame apology, and that's what it was lame, and she didn't mean a word of it, was just not appropriate.
Nearly a month later, at an event with Michigan Democrat Rashida Tlaib, Omar was asked about U.S. policy toward Israel.
I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country. I want to ask, why is it okay for me to talk about the influence of the NRA, of fossil fuel industries or big pharma, and not talk about a powerful lobbying group that is influencing policy?
Her critics called her reference to allegiance an anti-Semitic trope, accusing Jews of having more loyalty to each other than to their own countries. On the same day, a poster brought to a Republican event in West Virginia linked her to 9/11. By today's vote, Democrats expanded their resolution from anti-Semitism to condemning bigotry in many forms. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
It is in the spirit of unity and solidarity with my colleagues as we come together in this chamber of our American democracy to condemn all forms of hatred, racism, prejudice, and discrimination with a hopefully single and strong voice.
And the vote today specifically condemned anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all forms of hate. Now we get the views from leaders of two politically active Jewish organizations in Washington. Jeremy Ben-Ami is founder and president of J Street, which describes itself as a pro-Israel, pro-peace advocacy organization, and Josh Block, chief executive officer of the Israel Project, which describes itself as an educational organization dedicated to informing the media and the public about Israel and the Middle East. He worked at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as AIPAC, for nearly a decade. Thank you both for being on the NewsHour. Josh Block, let me start with you. Ilhan Omar says she's trying to criticize Israeli policy. She is trying to criticize the role of Jewish lobby groups, specifically AIPAC, in Washington. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with making policy concerns about Israel known, or even suggesting that you think that other folks in the political process are wrong. I think the trouble here is that there's been a pattern of using specific language that seeks to marginalize and stigmatize Jewish participation in the political process in a way that's very dangerous for Jews. This kind of language that we've seen seep into the political process in the United Kingdom is creating a climate there that's unsafe for Jews. And I think we need to be very conscious here of the need to stand up and make sure that the kind of anti-Semitic language, tropes, ideas, don't cloud the conversation when it comes to the discussion of Israel, which is a legitimate and important policy conversation to have.
Jeremy Ben-Ami, is the language dangerous?
Well, I think we can all agree that there is serious anti-Semitism in this country. It's a scourge that I think we are going to continue to fight for the rest of our lives and beyond. But I think the larger question for this society right now is, where does this atmosphere of hate and intolerance and racism come from? There's an atmosphere that's been created in this country, and it starts at the top with the President of the United States. And it has been created across the board. And it is not simply about anti-Semitism. It's affected people of Muslim faith, people of color, and we have an atmosphere right now that white nationalism, white supremacy, coming from the right politically, has created the atmosphere in which we're operating. That needs to be called out.
Josh Block, can we get to some of the substance of what Ilhan Omar is trying to say?
Sure. I just want to say, I think the problem with the framing of the conversation in a way of right-left is it really gets to the issue. The problem is anti-Semitism and the language that seeks to ostracize, delegitimize, and disenfranchise Jewish participation in the political process. And that language is insidious, and it needs to be singled out and stopped. And so when we then suggest that critics who've objected to Ilhan Omar's remarks in February were from the right, they weren't. The two Democratic members of Congress who sparked the discussion were Democrats. The concerns are being voiced by Jerry Nadler. We missed in the package earlier her tweet to a senior member, Nita Lowey, in which she accused her of being a dual loyalist. The language is, I think Jeremy is right. There is a problem in our society. Jews are targeted 6 out of 10 times by religiously motivated hate crimes. They're the #1 target of those crimes per capita in the country. Unfortunately, that has been the case for 2 decades. It's not just since the election of this last presidential election. So we need to be honest about the virality of this hate and confront it on both sides. And we should be clear, all bigotry and racism has no place in the discussion.
Jeremy Ben-Ami, I want to bring in the Israeli government into this conversation. Many journalists who have lived in Jerusalem, including me, have been accused of anti-Semitism for criticizing Israeli policies. Do you believe the Israeli government has encouraged the idea that critics of Israel are anti-Semitic?
Well, I think that there is a pattern, and there are some in Israeli politics. I think there are some in the politics of this country who do try to weaponize the charge of anti-Semitism in order to shut down debate. And I think there are instances where language goes too far, and I would agree with Josh, there are those instances, but there are many other instances, and many more, where the charge of anti-Semitism is used in order to delegitimize the critic or the journalist or the person who's talking. And it does shut down debate. It stifles the discussion of the actual issues that matter. How do we best end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? What are the actions that can be taken to help Palestinians and Israelis find a better future? And sometimes we can't have that discussion because the first time you criticize Israel, you're called an anti-Semite.
Josh Block, is that debate being scuttled by people who are using the word anti-Semite?
I think it's a specious argument to suggest that there's no criticism of Israel or that criticism of Israel is regularly stifled by such accusations. In fact, I think what we see is, again, the weaponization of this dialogue by folks on both the left and the right who's seeking to advance their political gain. I think we ought to focus on repairing the breach and educating those about the need to engage in civil dialogue around these policy issues. Now, again, I think it's certainly the case that we want to see evolution in Ilhan Omar's views. But I have to say I'm deeply alarmed by the resistance that we all saw in the Democratic caucus to moving forward swiftly and clearly in a denunciation. The circus that took place is a concern, I think, for American Jews. Those of us who have believed that for however many decades that the elected officials of the United States would act unequivocally and forcefully without delay in any way to confront these things, we should pause for a moment and really reflect on where we are as a society and how much more we have to do.
Jeremy Ben-Ami, I want to bring up President Trump. You mentioned him before. A couple of incidents here during the campaign. He tweeted an ad with Hillary Clinton. There it is, most corrupt candidate ever, inside the Star of David. His closing ad during the campaign, I think we've got some stills of that. He talked about money and global special interest over video of those three people, prominent Jews. More recently in Charlottesville, when white supremacists chanted death to Jews there, the president said there were fine people on both sides, and more recently suggested activist George Soros, who's Jewish, might have funded the campaign, or the caravan rather, coming up from Mexico. Is that accelerating anti-Semitism?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the tone for the country is set at the top. And unfortunately, I think that this president and some of the enablers around him, and in this case, unfortunately, it is within the Republican Party and it is on Capitol Hill and in the White House, they are enabling an atmosphere in which this kind of hate is festering. And the Pittsburgh shooter was not motivated by tweets that were critical of Israeli policy. The Pittsburgh shooter was motivated by this atmosphere of anti-immigrant, anti-Jewish hatred that has been fomented and made possible. And I don't see the Republican caucus engaging in the kind of condemnation of the president that we see here.
Very quickly from both of you, are you worried that Israel is becoming a partisan issue? We've got a new generation of Democrats, younger, more progressive, who are more interested in criticizing Israel.
Look, I think there's a unanimous consensus among the American public that Israel is one of our closest allies in the world. That's not changing. I think we see a strong bipartisan support for Israel in Congress. The U.S.'s relationship isn't reduced to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's much more there, and so I think we'll see a robust relationship for many years to come.
Quick answer on that?
I do think that Israel is becoming a partisan political football, and I think that folks on the right are trying to turn it into a culture war issue rather than a serious policy discussion.
Josh Block of the Israel Project, Jerry Ben-Ami of J Street, thank you very much to you both.
Thank you.